welcome. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Or, I might show up at your door. I'm just here to share some creepy stories, so sit back and enjoy. Disclaimer: the content presented in the video is purely for entertainment purposes only. The theories and stories discussed in this video are speculative and are not supported by any evidence or proof. Viewer discretion is advised. I always thought the night shift was the safest gig in radio. Less pressure, no corporate bigwigs breathing down your neck, just you, a mic, and the occasional drunk caller rambling about government conspiracies. It was peaceful in a weird way, until the night the static started talking back. My name's Alex Grayson. I host Nightwatch Radio, a late-night show where I play deep-cut rock tracks, take calls from insomniacs, and entertain weird theories about aliens and cryptids. The kind of thing that keeps truckers and graveyard shift workers company. Been doing it for years, and nothing ever shook me like what happened last night. It started with an emergency alert broadcast. I was mid-sentence, introducing an old Zeppelin track, when the speakers crackled with a sudden burst of static. The red ES warning flashed across the board, cutting me off mid-word. I frowned. Emergency alerts were rare, especially at 2:37 a.m. Usually, it meant a weather warning or an amber alert. The robotic voice began, tinny and distorted. "This is an emergency alert. This is not a test. Okay, standard so far. But then, do not trust the static. Do not let it listen." A pause. A hiss of dead air. Then the same message repeated, slower. "Do not trust the static." Then silence. I stared at the board. What the hell was that? The alert ended abruptly, cutting back to my show like nothing had happened. The song resumed from where it left off, as if the warning had never been there. I reached for my phone and checked my messages. Nothing. No station-wide memo. No texts from my boss. And when I glanced at the emergency broadcast logs, there was no record of an alert ever playing. The hair on the back of my neck prickled. I'd been in radio long enough to know that emergency alerts don't just happen. They're scheduled, coordinated. If one played, there should be a record. I shook it off, chalking it up to a technical glitch. Okay, folks, I said, forcing a chuckle into the mic. Not sure what that was. Maybe someone at the station's having fun with us. Anyway, here's another track for you night owls out there. I hit play on a classic, leaned back, and took a deep breath. That's when the phone line lit up. The first caller was a regular, Dan, a trucker who called in a few times a week to rant about traffic and his ex-wife. But tonight, his voice was different. Shaky. "Alex," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Did you hear it?" I frowned. "The emergency alert?" A pause. "Yeah," he said, but he didn't sound sure. "It's been happening on other stations, too. But when I try to replay it, there's nothing. It's just static." I hesitated. "Might be a tech issue, Dan. Some glitch in the system." "It's not a glitch." His breath hitched. "Something's in it." I forced a laugh. "Come on, man. You trying to freak me out?" "I'm serious," he hissed. "I was scanning stations earlier and some of them, Alex, the static wasn't random. It was talking. That made me pause." "Talking?" Dan let out a ragged breath. "I can't explain it. But when I listened too long, it felt like it knew I was there, like it was listening back." My mouth was dry. Before I could respond, a burst of sharp static exploded through my headset. I yanked it off with a curse, wincing as the feedback screeched through the studio speakers. Then a whisper, soft, muffled, hidden beneath the white noise. "You're not alone." I froze. The static cut out. "Dan was gone." "Dan?" I said, but the line was dead. I checked the call log. His number gone. It was like he had never called. I sat there, staring at the board, my pulse hammering in my ears. The song playing in the background distorted, just for a second. A brief, warbling moment where the vocals weren't the vocals anymore. like someone else had spoken over them. I hit stop. The studio fell into eerie silence. I rewound the recording and played it back. No distortion, no static, just music. I rubbed my eyes. I was tired. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. The emergency alert had rattled me, that's all. I glanced at the clock. 3:02 a.m. 2 more hours to go. I reached for my coffee and froze. The monitor flickered. Then the radio signal cut to static. And through the static, someone whispered my name. Alex. At first, I thought it was a coincidence. Maybe my ears were playing tricks on me. But the way it said my name, it wasn't normal. It dragged out the syllables, stretching them, as if the voice itself was warped by the static. A chill crept up my spine. I swallowed hard and checked the station logs again. Still nothing. I exhaled, rubbing my temples. Okay, I muttered under my breath. This is getting weird. I decided to shake it off and keep the show going. I queued up another song, an old Stones track, then leaned back, forcing myself to relax. But the moment the song played, the monitor flickered again. The studio lights dimmed, and for a split second, just before the static overtook the speakers, I could have sworn I heard footsteps in the hallway outside. Slow, heavy, deliberate. I held my breath. The studio door was locked. I always made sure of that. But suddenly, I wasn't so sure. I reached for my phone, debating whether to call security, but my fingers hesitated over the screen. What was I going to say? That the static was whispering my name? That the emergency alert had vanished? That I was hearing things? No, that sounded insane. Instead, I turned up the volume on my headset, trying to drown out the paranoia creeping into my brain. But as I did, the static returned. Not just a crackle, a full signal hijack. The Stones track warped, slowed, then distorted into pure white noise. And beneath it, beneath the shifting hiss and hum, I heard breathing, close, too close. It wasn't coming from the speakers. It was coming from right behind me. The breathing was right behind me, shallow, uneven, too real. I spun around so fast that my chair nearly tipped over. Nothing. The studio was empty. Just the dim glow of the monitors and the silent, lifeless equipment. The only sound was the static, hissing softly through the speakers. I let out a slow breath, pressing a hand to my chest. My heart was hammering like a jackhammer. Maybe I was losing it. Maybe the late nights were finally catching up to me. I reached for the station's emergency mic. Folks, I forced a nervous chuckle. We're having some technical difficulties tonight. Bear with me. The moment I spoke, the static cut out. The silence that followed was heavier than it should have been, like the room was listening. I cleared my throat, trying to shake the unease creeping up my spine. Anyway, here's another track for you night owls. I hit play. The song never started. The static returned, louder this time, like a roaring ocean wave. My stomach twisted as I reached for the controls, twisting knobs, flipping switches. Nothing responded. Then, just beneath the noise, I heard it, a voice. At first, it was faint, buried under the white noise, a whisper struggling to break through, but it was there. I leaned closer to the speakers, heart pounding. Alex! I jerked back so hard that I slammed into the desk. No way. I glanced at the monitor, no signal interference. No incoming calls. Nothing that could explain what I just heard. But the voice didn't stop. It was getting clearer. Help me. My breath caught in my throat. The voice was wrong. It didn't sound fully human. There was something distorted about it, like multiple voices speaking at once. And then, bang, a loud, heavy knock on the studio door. I jumped. Another knock. Harder this time. Someone was outside. I hesitated. My hand hovered over the lock. Knocking at 3:30 a.m.? No way. The building was empty except for the security guard downstairs, and even he never came up. Bang, bang, bang. My breath came in shallow gasps. I reached for my phone with trembling fingers and pulled up the security feed. The hallway outside the studio was empty, but the knocking didn't stop. I stared at the screen, my mouth dry. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. I waited, listening. Silence. I exhaled shakily, running a hand through my hair. This was insane. The alert, the static, the voice, there had to be a rational explanation. Maybe someone was messing with me, or maybe I was more tired than I thought. Yeah, that had to be it. I forced myself to breathe, to focus. "All right?" I muttered, shaking my head. "Just a long night. Keep it together, Alex." I turned back to the console and froze. The signal was gone. No music, no emergency alert, just static. And buried in that static, beneath the shifting, crackling hum, a new voice, not whispering, not pleading, laughing. I yanked off my headset and scrambled backward. My pulse thundered in my ears. Nope, this was not normal. I had to get out of here. I grabbed my phone, my keys, anything I could carry, and bolted for the door. The second I unlocked it, the hallway lights flickered. I hesitated. That feeling was back. That terrible, unnatural feeling, like the room was watching me. I swallowed hard. Go, just go. I stepped into the hallway. It was too quiet. The air felt wrong, stagnant, heavy. I forced myself forward, each step slow and deliberate. The exit was just down the hall. If I could make it to the stairwell, I'd be fine. I reached the corner and turned. Then I saw it, and my blood ran cold. The security camera mounted above the stairwell, the feed I had just checked minutes ago, was displaying static. And in that static, something moved. A shadow. Twisting. Contorting. I blinked. It was closer. I staggered back, my mind screaming at me to run. Then the lights went out. For a moment, there was only blackness. And then the static came alive. It surged through the speakers in the hallway, filling the space with a deep, resonant hum. The walls seemed to vibrate with it, the air crackling with unseen energy. And the voice returned, no longer a whisper, no longer pleading. It was clear. It was everywhere. "We hear you." I stumbled back, my breath ragged. No. The static shifted, and in the middle of it, something stepped forward. A shape, a figure, made entirely of distortion. Its form flickered like a broken signal, warping and glitching, just like the radio interference. And it was looking at me. I turned and ran. I sprinted down the hall. My only thought was getting the hell out of the building. But the moment I reached the stairwell door, static, a wall of pure white noise roared through the space, slamming into me like a physical force. I clamped my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. The sound was inside me, rattling my skull, vibrating through my bones. I collapsed to my knees, gasping. And then the static spoke. "Stay." The word crawled through my mind, not just heard, but felt. I gritted my teeth, forcing myself to move. I reached for the stairwell door, my fingers shaking. It swung open on its own. I didn't think. I just ran. Down the stairs, skipping steps, nearly tripping over myself. I didn't stop until I crashed through the lobby doors, gasping for air. I turned back, expecting, what? A shadow? A figure? Some kind of thing following me? But the building was still, quiet, like nothing had happened, like it had been waiting for me to leave. My phone vibrated in my pocket. A new emergency alert. Hands shaking, I pulled it out and read the message. "Emergency alert system. This is not a test. Do not listen to the static. Do not respond if it calls your name. Do not run." I stared at the last line. Then the radio in my car turned on by itself. And through the static, I heard my own voice. "Alex, you shouldn't have left." I stared at the car radio, my breath coming in sharp, uneven gasps. The static hummed through the speakers, and buried in it, my own voice. "Alex, you shouldn't have left." No, that wasn't possible. I fumbled for the power button, my fingers slick with sweat. Click. Nothing. The radio wouldn't turn off. "Come back inside, Alex." The voice on the radio was me, but twisted, hollow, like an old recording played at the wrong speed. I reached for the volume dial, twisting it down to 0. But the sound didn't change. "Don't ignore me." A new noise crackled beneath the static. Laughter. Not human. Not entirely. Something was enjoying this. I yanked the keys from the ignition. The engine shut off, but the radio kept playing. The static shifted, and for a moment, I swore I heard something moving in it, like feet shuffling over gravel, like something was getting closer. I bolted. I sprinted across the parking lot, my shoes slapping against the pavement. My apartment was only a few blocks away. If I could get there, lock the door, maybe this, whatever this was, would stop. The air felt thick, charged, like before a thunderstorm. Every street lamp I passed flickered, casting long, shifting shadows that seemed to move when I wasn't looking. Halfway home, my phone vibrated. I didn't want to check it. I didn't want to know, but my body moved on its own. Emergency alert system. Do not go home. I skidded to a stop. My lungs burned from the run, my breath sharp and ragged. I stared at the message, dread coiling in my gut. Do not go home. My fingers hovered over the screen, waiting for another message, another warning. Something. Nothing came. Then, from down the street, a radio clicked on. A car, parked at the curb, empty. The stereo was blaring static. And beneath the static, Alex. I ran. I didn't stop until I reached Miller's Diner. Open 24/7. Bright. Safe. I slammed through the doors, nearly knocking over the bored-looking waitress behind the counter. A couple of tired truckers glanced up from their coffee, then went back to ignoring the world. Whoa, the waitress said, adjusting her name tag. Renee. You okay, dude? I nodded, trying to catch my breath. Yeah, just coffee. Please. She gave me a weird look but didn't push. A minute later, a steaming cup landed in front of me. My hands were still shaking when I grabbed it. I sat there for a while, letting the normal sounds of the diner wash over me. The clink of silverware, the low hum of conversation. No static, no whispers. For the first time in hours, I felt normal, until the radio behind the counter flickered on, and the static returned. I stiffened. Renee didn't seem to notice. The truckers kept drinking their coffee. They didn't hear it. I swallowed hard, staring at the radio as the static warped and shifted. And then, a voice, not mine this time, a woman's, soft, familiar. Alex, it's me. Please listen. My stomach twisted. No, because I knew that voice. It had been 6 years since I last heard it. Since the day my sister, Lena, went missing. I shot out of my seat, my chair scraping against the floor. Renee raised an eyebrow. You good? I barely heard her. The radio crackled. You have to come back, Alex. My head spun. I grabbed the counter to steady myself. No, I whispered. You're not real. Please, you have to hurry. It's not safe out there. I turned to Renee, my throat dry. What station is this? She blinked. What? The radio, I said, pointing. What station is it on? She gave me an even weirder look. Dude, it's off. I stopped breathing. She was right. The radio's display was dark. The power knob was turned all the way down, and yet the voice was still playing. Alex, please. A lump formed in my throat. If this was real, if that voice was actually Lena, could I ignore it? My hands curled into fists. I had spent years trying to forget that night. The search parties, the missing posters, the endless theories. Lena was gone. But now, Alex, something inside me snapped. I turned on my heel and ran back into the night. The streets felt different, colder, quieter, like the whole city was holding its breath. The static followed me, creeping from passing cars, flickering through televisions in darkened apartments. I wasn't running toward my apartment anymore. I was running back to the station, back to where this started. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. Another car radio turned on as I passed. Then another. The voices were getting louder. Come back. Almost there. Hurry. When I finally reached the radio station, the front doors were already open, like something had been waiting. I hesitated, my pulse hammering. This is a mistake. But I stepped inside anyway. The lobby was empty. The lights flickered overhead. The static had never stopped. I swallowed hard and kept moving. Past the empty receptionist's desk, past the dark hallways, back toward Studio 3, back to where I had heard the first alert. The door was slightly ajar, and inside, the monitors were on. The radio signal was waiting, and sitting in my chair, facing away from me, was someone else. My heart slammed against my ribs. The figure twitched. And then, in a voice that was almost, but not quite, my sister's, it whispered, "You're finally back." I should have turned around. I should have run. But I couldn't. Something about the way it sat there, motionless, head tilted just slightly, like it was listening to something I couldn't hear, froze me in place. The monitors cast a sickly blue light across the room. The radio equipment was still on, static crackling softly through the speakers. And the figure, it was wrong. Not just someone else sitting in my chair, something else. His posture was too stiff, its shoulders too high, its head tilted at an unnatural angle, like a puppet that had been left in the wrong position. Twitched, a sharp, jerky movement like its body was remembering how to work. And then it spoke. "You're finally back." The voice wasn't Lena's. It was close. So close that it sent a jolt of memory straight to my chest. Sleepovers as kids, her voice teasing me when I was too scared to watch horror movies with her. But there was something off. Too many voices. Too much static bleeding into the words, like something was wearing her voice. I took a slow step backward. The floor creaked. The figure's head snapped toward me. I stopped breathing. His face was still in shadow. The monitors behind it created a harsh silhouette, obscuring its features. But I could feel its eyes on me, watching, waiting. The air in the studio shifted. The static from the speakers deepened, became something else, a sound just on the edge of hearing. Not just white noise, whispering, dozens of voices, hundreds, layered over one another, shifting, overlapping, repeating words and phrases I couldn't quite make out. And buried beneath them, a single voice, clear, familiar. "Alex, please," I shuddered, because that one sounded real. I clenched my fists. My fingernails dug into my palms, grounding me, forcing me to stay here. To stay me. I swallowed hard and forced my voice to work. "Who are you?" Silence. For a long moment, the figure didn't move. Then slowly, too slowly, it stood. The chair rolled back on its own, like the studio itself was pulling it away. The figure stepped forward. The static rose to a deafening screech. I winced, clamping my hands over my ears, and the figure lurched toward me. I barely had time to react. I staggered back, my hips slamming into the console. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. The figure stopped just shy of the monitors, its shape flickering, glitching, like it wasn't fully in this reality. And then it leaned forward, into the light. I felt my stomach drop, because the face staring back at me was mine, but wrong, stretched, distorted, the skin rippling, shifting, like a bad signal struggling to stabilize. Its mouth moved, but when it spoke, "Alex, it's me. It's Lena." My whole body went cold. I shook my head, stepping back. No, you're not." The thing in my shape twitched. "I missed you." The voice warped. Fragments of my own voice bled into it. I gritted my teeth. "You're lying." It took another glitching step forward. "Come back." A pulse of static shot through the room. The monitors flickered. The radio equipment buzzed. And for a split second, the thing's face distorted again. No longer me, no longer Lena, something else, something faceless. I took another step back and bumped into the door. That's when I realized the static wasn't just coming from the speakers. It was coming from the hall too, from the walls, from the ceiling. And in that moment, I understood. The whole building was listening. I was never alone. I gritted my teeth. No, I am not playing this game. I turned and bolted. The hallways felt longer, stretched, like I was running through a signal that wouldn't fully load. The fluorescent lights flickered. Shadows twisted at the edges of my vision, shifting like static patterns on an old TV screen. I pushed forward, lungs burning, every instinct in my body screaming at me to move faster. The static chased me, growing louder. I reached the stairwell. I yanked open the door, and the moment I stepped through, everything changed. I wasn't in the stairwell. I wasn't anywhere. I turned in a slow circle, my breath coming fast and shallow. Darkness surrounded me. Not empty darkness, something more. A void, a space filled with shifting, glitching shapes, like I had stepped into the radio itself. I tried to move, but the air felt thick, heavy. Then, from the static, a shape formed. A door with a cracked radio dial where the handle should be. The dials twitched, spun, and behind it, I heard her voice. "Alex, I need you to find me." I squeezed my eyes shut. "You're not real. Please." Something deep in my chest ached. What if? No, I shook my head. I know what this is. I forced my body to move, reaching for the dial, and twisted it the other way. The moment I did, the static shattered. I hit the ground hard. The scent of burnt circuits filled my nose. My ears rang. I was on the floor of the radio station. The real one. Everything was silent. No static. No whispers. No thing waiting in my chair. I let out a shaky breath, but as I sat up, my blood turned to ice. The monitors were still on, and on the screen, a new emergency alert message was waiting. My hands trembled as I reached for the keyboard. I clicked on it. Emergency alert system. This is not a test. The broadcast is not over. You are still listening. And then the radio clicked on, and the static came back. The radio clicked on. I flinched. The static poured from the speakers, filling the studio like thick fog, pressing against my skin. I scrambled to my feet, my pulse hammering. My eyes locked onto the monitors. The emergency alert message still glowed on the screen. Emergency alert system. This is not a test. The broadcast is not over. You are still listening. I swallowed hard. The broadcast was still happening. But where? I reached for the keyboard, my fingers shaking. I had to shut it down. I jabbed at the controls, closing programs, muting channels. Nothing worked. The static didn't stop. And then, through the speakers, a voice. "Alex." My stomach dropped. It was Lena, or at least something pretending to be her. I clenched my jaw. "You're not real. You have to listen." The static shifted. For a brief moment, it wasn't just noise. It was a sound, something familiar. Footsteps. I went still. The sound wasn't coming from the speakers. It was coming from the hallway. Something was walking toward me. I turned slowly. My breath caught in my throat. The studio door was open. I knew I had closed it. I knew, but now it was open just enough for me to see the dark hallway beyond. And in that darkness, something moved. A shadow. Not fast. Not jerky or twitching like before. Slow. Deliberate. It was coming inside. I backed up, my shoulder hitting the console. The monitors flickered, static buzzing like a swarm of insects. "You shouldn't have turned it off, Alex." The voice was closer now, no longer coming from the radio. It was in the room. The door creaked as it opened further. I fought the urge to squeeze my eyes shut. I already knew. I did not want to see whatever was standing there, but I looked anyway, and I regretted it instantly. The thing standing in the doorway was me, or rather, something wearing me. Like before, its face was almost right. The shape of my jaw, the slope of my nose. But the eyes, empty, dark, like an old television screen turned off, waiting to flicker to life. It smiled, not the way a human does. Too wide, too forced, like it had learned how from watching me. "You're still listening." The static surged. The lights flickered. I knew I had to move. I turned and lunged for the emergency power switch. If I could cut the broadcast at the source, maybe I could stop this. I grabbed the switch, pulled. The studio plunged into darkness. The monitors died. The speakers cut off. Silence. For a moment, all I could hear was my own ragged breathing. I took a shaky step back, my fingers still curled around the switch. Did it work? I turned, and the figure was right in front of me. I fell backward, hitting the floor hard. My vision blurred, panic clawing up my throat. The figure leaned down. Up close, it was worse. The skin rippled, like a screen struggling to display the right image. Its mouth moved, but when it spoke, "Don't you get it?" The words weren't just in my ears. They were in my head. My limbs felt heavy, my thoughts sluggish. The air around me hummed, like I was standing in the middle of a broadcast signal. "You can't stop listening." The lights flickered back on, but I hadn't touched the power. The monitors snapped to life, and on the screens, I saw myself. Not here, not in the studio, somewhere else. A place I didn't recognize. A long, dark hallway, and at the end of that hallway, a door. The same door I had seen before, the one with the cracked radio dial. My heartbeat slammed against my ribs. "Come inside, Alex." The static surged. The screens glitched. I tried to look away, but my reflection didn't move. My stomach twisted. The thing on the screen, it wasn't me anymore. It was smiling, but I wasn't. The static pounded in my head. I squeezed my eyes shut, forcing a thought through the haze. I have to get out. I forced myself to move, shoved myself off the floor, ignoring the sickening pull in my gut, and ran. The hallway was wrong, too long. The walls stretched out, endless rows of darkened offices and soundproof booths. The exit sign flickered at the far end, distant, hazy, like a mirage. I ran anyway. Behind me, the static followed. It wasn't just coming from the studio anymore. It was in the walls, the floor, the air itself. The building was alive with it. And then a new sound, footsteps, right behind me, too fast. I didn't dare turn around. I just ran harder. The exit sign flickered. For a moment, I swore I saw something else written there. No way out. I shoved the door open, and instead of stepping outside, I was standing somewhere else. The room was wrong, familiar and unfamiliar at the same time. Took me a second to realize it was my apartment, but not quite. The furniture was off. My couch was in the wrong place. My kitchen table was missing. And worst of all, the radio was on, sitting on my nightstand, humming. The static was waiting. I took a step forward, my throat dry. My phone buzzed. I looked down. A new emergency alert message had appeared. Emergency alert system. This is not a test. You never left. The static spiked. A shadow moved in the corner of the room. Something was here. And then, through the radio, Alex, pick up the receiver. I stood frozen, my breath shallow. My eyes locked on the radio sitting on my nightstand. The static hummed through the speaker. Not loud, not harsh, waiting. And then, Alex, pick up the receiver. Lena's voice, or whatever was using her voice. I took a slow step back, my phone still clutched in my hand. The emergency alert message glowed on the screen. Emergency alert system. This is not a test. You never left. My stomach twisted. I had left, hadn't I? I ran through my own memories, trying to pinpoint the moment I had stepped out of the radio station. I had reached the exit, shoved the door open, and ended up here, my apartment, but not quite. Something was off. The furniture was arranged differently. The air was too still, too thick, like the space wasn't fully real. I swallowed hard, gripping my phone like a lifeline. My fingers hovered over the screen, ready to dial. Dial who? No one could help me. The radio buzzed. I flinched. You're still listening. The static warped. Beneath the noise, I could hear it whispering. Soft, layered voices, overlapping, speaking just below the threshold of understanding. I knew I shouldn't get closer, but my body betrayed me. One step, then another. I was standing in front of the nightstand before I could even register moving. The radio was an old model. Black, boxy with silver dials. I had never owned one like this, but somehow I recognized it. From where? The static shifted again. I reached out. My fingers brushed the receiver. Cold, not plastic, something else. Something that sent a pulse of wrongness up my arm. I snatched my hand back. The static spiked, and then the whispering became clear. Alex, help me. My stomach dropped, because that was definitely Lena, not just her voice, her real voice. I squeezed my eyes shut. It's a trick. It has to be a trick. Please. It's dark. I don't know where I am. Something deep inside me twisted. Because what if it wasn't a trick? What if she was really trapped somewhere? And what if this thing, this signal was the only way to reach her? I opened my eyes. The receiver sat there, waiting. I clenched my teeth, my pulse pounding in my ears. And before I could stop myself, I picked it up. The static stopped. A thick, unnatural silence pressed in around me. For a moment, I thought the line was dead. Then a click, followed by breathing, shaky, human. And then, Alex, my heart lurched. It was her, really her. I gripped the receiver tighter. Lena, oh God. Alex, is that you? I almost collapsed with relief. Yes, it's me. Where are you? I don't know. It's dark and cold. I can hear you, but her voice crackled, like an old signal struggling to come through. I swallowed hard. Lena, listen. Something's wrong. I don't think I'm in my real apartment. I think Alex, "It's not your apartment." A chill ripped down my spine. I already knew that. But hearing her say it made it feel real. Too real. My grip on the receiver tightened. "Then where the hell am I?" Silence. "Then, I don't know. But it's watching you." My blood turned to ice. The air in the room suddenly felt thick, suffocating. I turned slowly and saw it. A shadow in the corner. Not a person, not a shape, just absence. A space where nothing should be. But I could feel it watching, waiting. I gritted my teeth, gripping the receiver like a lifeline. "Lena, tell me how to get out." The static hissed. Her voice was faint, like she was being pulled away. "You need to go back." I turned in a slow circle, scanning the room. "Go back where?" "Back to the signal. Back to the source." My mind reeled. The station. I had to get back to the radio station. But how? This place, this fake apartment, wasn't real. I had stepped through a door that shouldn't have led here. I needed to break the connection. "Alex." Lena's voice was weaker now. I had to act fast. My eyes darted to the radio. I gritted my teeth. If I got here through the broadcast, then maybe I could get out the same way. I dropped the receiver, ignoring the way Lena's voice crackled and cut out. I grabbed the radio's dial, twisted it. The static screamed. The room shuddered. The lights flickered. And in the reflection of the darkened TV screen, I saw the shadow move, not toward me, toward the radio, like it was trying to stop me. Too late. I twisted the dial all the way. Everything snapped. The walls buckled. The floor tilted. A deafening roar of static swallowed everything. And then I was falling, plunging through blackness, past shifting signals and flickering lights, through frequencies that no human ears should hear. And then I hit the ground, hard. The scent of burnt electronics filled my nose. I gasped, coughing, and realized I was back, lying on the radio station floor. The monitors were dark. The speakers were silent. For a long moment, I just lay there, my whole body trembling. And then my phone buzzed. I turned it over. A new emergency alert message. "Emergency alert system. Signal interrupted. Status unknown." I swallowed hard. And then, beneath that, a second message appeared. Personal message from an unknown number. One word. "Help." I stood in my apartment, or at least what was pretending to be my apartment. The radio hummed on my nightstand, static rolling through the speakers in soft, rhythmic waves. "Alex, pick up the receiver." Lena's voice. Clear. Familiar. But I knew better now. Lena was gone. I tightened my grip on my phone, my eyes flicking back to the emergency alert. "Emergency alert system. This is not a test. You never left." The words burned into my brain. Somewhere between the station and here, I had been pulled into the broadcast. I took a step back. The air around me felt wrong, like the static wasn't just coming from the radio anymore. It was in the walls, the floor, the very air itself. I glanced at my windows. Dark. Too dark. Not just nighttime dark. A void. No streetlights. No city glow. No world outside at all. I wasn't in my apartment. I was still inside the signal. The radio crackled. "Why won't you listen, Alex?" The voice wasn't Lena's anymore. It was something else. Something that had been watching me, learning me. I swallowed hard. "I'm not playing this game." I turned for the door. I didn't know what was beyond it, but I couldn't stay here. I reached for the handle. The knob turned on its own. I stumbled back as the door creaked open. Beyond it was not my hallway. It was the radio station, or what was left of it. I stepped forward, my heart hammering. The station was in ruins. The walls sagged inward like something had been chewing through them. The floorboards were warped, blackened, like they had been burned. The monitors in the control room were flickering, showing me images of myself seconds ago, standing in my fake apartment. The broadcast was still running, still trapping me inside it. My stomach twisted. "How do I turn this off?" "You can't." The voice slithered through the speakers. I turned sharply, and there it was, standing at the end of the hall. The thing in the hallway looked like me, but worse than before. It had stabilized. The shifting, glitching distortion was gone. It looked solid now. Whole. It smiled. Perfect, practiced smile, like it had been learning. I took a step back. So did it. I raised my arm. So did it. A second too late, like it was waiting for me to move first. copying me, but then, without warning, took a step forward. I didn't. My blood turned to ice. It wasn't copying me anymore. "You don't need to leave, Alex." His voice was my voice. I turned and ran. I tore through the station, my footsteps echoing against the warped walls. The static was everywhere. The monitors flickered, shifting, watching. I caught glimpses of myself in the screens, but not in real time. Different versions. Some sitting at the console, headphones on, calmly speaking into the microphone. Others standing completely still, staring into the camera. One of them, grinning at me. I kept running. The exit was ahead, the door wide open. I shoved through it and found myself back in the control room. I skidded to a stop, my stomach lurching. No, I just left. The door behind me slammed shut. The static roared, and then the monitors came to life. One by one, they flickered on, showing dozens of me, not old footage, not past moments. Now, in other places, some of them were sitting in bedrooms, some walking down unfamiliar streets, some staring into mirrors. All of them were watching me. "The signal wants you, Alex." I clenched my fists. "I don't care. It's too late." The screens flickered, and I saw it. The thing, not just one, hundreds, standing behind the different versions of me in the monitors, waiting, smiling, taking my place. And in the reflection of the screen right behind me, I spun around, too late. A cold hand clamped over my mouth. The static poured into my head. My vision blurred. The room melted away. I was somewhere else. A dark, empty radio station. Not the one I knew. Something older. Forgotten. Dust covered the console. The chair was empty. The microphone was on. I stepped forward, my movements slow, my limbs not my own. I could hear it now. A voice. My voice, speaking into the microphone. I listened, and I heard the words I had been running from all along. "This is Alex Mercer. You're listening to the late night broadcast. Stay tuned for more updates, because you're still listening." The static spiked, the monitors glowed, and then they all went black. I stood in the wrong version of my apartment. The radio on my nightstand crackled, its static pulsing like a heartbeat. The emergency alert on my phone still burned into my vision. "Emergency alert system. This is not a test. You never left." A shadow shifted in the corner of the room. I didn't turn my head. I didn't need to. I already knew it was watching me. "Alex." Lena's voice drifted from the radio again. Soft, insistent. "Pick up the receiver." My fingers twitched. Every instinct in me screamed not to do it. I knew what happened to people who listened too long. But the static was everywhere now, in the walls, the air, inside my skull. I could feel it tuning me in. I forced myself to move, not toward the radio, toward the door. I grabbed the handle, turned it, locked. I rattled it harder. The walls shuddered. The static spiked. Something laughed. Not from the radio, from the hallway outside. "You're still listening." My breath caught. The voice wasn't Lena's anymore. It was mine. I took a slow, deliberate step back. The emergency alert on my phone updated. I watched, horrified, as the words shifted. "Emergency alert system. This is not a test. Turn around." I didn't want to, but I had to. I turned, and there I was, standing in the doorway, smiling, not like a person smiles, like a reflection does, but warped slightly off, like a signal struggling to stay clear. My doppelganger tilted its head. "You finally hear it, don't you?" His voice was my own, but layered, distorted. I opened my mouth, but my throat felt full of static. I had to move. I had to break the signal. The radio. I turned and lunged. My fingers curled around the receiver. The instant I touched it, a surge of sound exploded through the room. The walls warped, the lights dimmed, and suddenly, I wasn't in my apartment anymore. I was back in the station. The emergency broadcast still played across the monitors, flickering between warnings and warped reflections of me sitting in the chair. The room felt wrong, like I had never left, like I had only tuned into a different frequency. I stumbled backward, my pulse hammering. The monitors glitched. My own face stared back at me from the screen, smiling, not moving, just watching. "The signal doesn't stop, Alex. It just finds new listeners." I turned to the console. The emergency alert continued its relentless broadcast. I slammed my hands on the controls, desperate to shut it down. But the buttons did nothing. The signal was still going, still reaching. A whisper crawled through the speakers. "You understand now, don't you?" My reflection on the monitor grinned. "You are the broadcast." I froze. I looked down at my hands. They glitched, flickered, like a weak signal. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I hadn't stopped the emergency alert. I had only become part of it. The monitor flickered again. The broadcast changed. A new alert. Emergency alert system. This is not a test. A new transmission has begun. The radio hissed, and then a new voice, terrified, desperate. "Hello? Can anyone hear me? I think something's wrong with my radio." A new listener. The signal had found someone else. I tried to scream, tried to warn them, but the static swallowed me whole. The emergency alert continued, and I was still listening.